This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
It's a big day, a very big day, a huge day as American President Donald Trump welcomes Russian President Vladimir Putin to a summit in the American state of Alaska. If you were with us a couple of episodes ago, we talked to Canadian Senator Charles Adler about what's at stake here, what he makes of it all. In just a second, Canada's National Observer lead columnist Max Fawcett on the summit, what America gains to lose or could qualify as a win, what Russia might be looking for in all of this, and of course, all of this through a Canadian lens. Plus, we're going to take a look at the trade war that's happening, that's continuing between Canada and the United States. Is Canada losing it? Max has a piece out on that at nationalobserver.com, and we want to localize some of the other stories that are making news as well, including those of you, we feel your pain, those of you that have big summer trips planned. They could be weddings, they could be family getaways. Maybe it's just, business, but your plans have been interrupted, of course, by what appears to be an inevitable strike by Air Canada's flight attendants. All of this coming up in just a second, but before we get to Max, I wanted to play you a clip. It was shared by journalist Aaron Rupar just a short time ago, hours ago. This as the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief of the world's most powerful military, of course, the President of the most influential nation on planet Earth, with apologies to China, but I do believe it still to be true. A journalist asking POTUS what he makes of reports that the Russians have been hacking American assets. As a matter of fact, hacking computer systems that manage federal court documents in the United States. It sets the table, I think, for the summit, and not in a good way. Here's that exchange.
There's new reporting that the Russians have hacked into some computer systems that manage U.S. federal court documents. I wonder if you've seen this reporting and if you plan to bring it up with Putin when you see him later in the week.
I guess I could. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? They hack in. That's what they do. They're good at it. We're good at it. We're actually better at it. But no, I have heard about it. I have heard about it.
Okay, that's what they do. That's what we do. Maybe there's nothing wrong with any of this. Maybe that just is the way of the world. Let's ask the lead columnist for Canada's National Observer in our feature interview presented by our friends at Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. He is Max Fawcett. It's nice to see your face. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. Good to be back.
Yeah, should alarm bells be going off for Americans and others concerned about Russians hacking, or do we just agree? China hacks, Russia hacks, America hacks, everybody's hacking. What did you make of that exchange?
I think on the list of things that should be causing alarm bells for people with respect to Donald Trump, that statement is probably pretty low. He's right in some respects that Russians are good at hacking. The American government does it. Everyone kind of does it. He's always had this way about him where he kind of punctures the image that Americans like to have of themselves as being, warriors of the free world, and they do things better and cleaner than everyone else. And, he's always kind of pointed out that Americans do things in terms of foreign policy, in terms of, interventions in other people's countries that are the same as what Russia does in a lot of respects. So I don't mind that from him. There are so many other things that he says and does with respect to Russia that cause me so much more concern. And I suppose we'll get into those in a moment. But the fact that he's willing to brush off Russia's hacking efforts, sort of any kind of hostile activity towards the United States, is par for the course, and it's been what he's done basically since he entered politics. God help us, a decade ago.
Yeah, I would suggest that anybody that's going to be meeting with, another high-profile and powerful leader, an American-Russian summit on American soil in the state of Alaska, which obviously has historical significance, is going to involve, you expect some negotiation. Obviously, the two of them coming in on probably more friendly terms than people might be accustomed to. I think that it's safe to say an assumption that Russia has to have something on Trump. That's what people have been speculating around for a long time. We talked to Senator Charles Adler a couple of days before you on the 13th of August. He described this meeting that's happening essentially as we're talking as a ultimate fighting champion arm wrestling a hamster. He characterizes Putin as the champ and Trump as the one with something to lose. He also suggested, and people can check out that interview in its entirety, that as long as the Dow is healthy, as long as American stock markets and investors are happy, then Donald Trump's popularity will not suffer regardless of what happens in Alaska. What are you paying keen attention to?
Yeah, I think the reaction coming out of the meeting, the language he uses, he's said that a second meeting there might not be, that he might put additional sanctions on, he might not. I think everyone knows what the score is here. Trump is very friendly with Putin and the Russians, kind of conspicuously so, and clearly wants to strike a deal here to get his Nobel Peace Prize. He's very interested in that Nobel Peace Prize because, of course, Barack Obama got one, and that really bothers him. So, I think he will try to get a deal, and I think he will make some very significant concessions on Ukraine's behalf. Whether it's land that Russia currently occupies, resources, you name it. I think Putin is going in here, kind of ready to get the best deal imaginable. If he had been dealing with Kamala Harris or a Democratic president, he would not be in such a strong and advantageous position. But unless Putin plays this really, really poorly, he's going to come out of this the big winner. America's going to spin it like they're a winner because Trump gets his Nobel Prize or whatever it might be, and Ukraine is probably going to end up being the big loser, and that is a stain on the United States. It's a stain on Trump's presidency, and it's one that we're all going to have to live with. But I just can't imagine that he is going to drive a hard bargain with a guy like Vladimir Putin. Senator Adler described it as a ultimate fighting match. Trump himself said it's going to be a chess match. Well, who do you trust to play chess better? A Russian former KGB officer like Vladimir Putin or Donald Trump? I would put all my money on the Russian here. So I think most of the civilized world is kind of holding its breath and hoping things don't go too catastrophically, excuse me. But I wouldn't put a lot of faith in that.
Let me ask you about your op-ed that was published at nationalobserver.com just a couple of days ago on the 13th of August. You say Canada isn't losing the trade war yet. You quite rightfully assess Mark Carney's successful election campaign as one in which he convinced Canadians that he was the best equipped party leader to deal with Donald Trump. And then you take a look at his performance 3 months in. Take us into it.
Sure. There's been a lot of naysaying and I would suggest bedwetting on the part of mostly conservatives who are looking at these quote unquote trade deals that have been agreed to by European Union, South Korea, Japan, and suggesting that the fact that we don't have one of those deals means that Carney is failing, that we are on the wrong end of this. Even Paul Wells, who is one of the wisest and best writers in the country, kind of suggested that Trump was winning his trade war, and I just don't think the evidence supports that. You see the fallout from the trade deals announced with those countries, where basically European officials, Japanese officials have had to, I don't know if it's walk back, but kind of try to explain to Trump that no, these promises we made of investing money in your country is not a slush fund for you to personally direct. We're not giving you money. In a lot of respects, the investments that were announced are just investments that were already going to happen. The European Union can't tell businesses where to spend their money. And we saw this in the first Trump term. China made all these promises of billions of dollars in investment in the United States. They never materialized. This is an old tactic with Trump. So the deals, such as they are kind of basically thin air. It's an extortion racket that Trump is running. And I think Mark Carney is right not to play. He understands that the economy in the United States is deteriorating. We just saw an inflation print yesterday that was red hot. The inflation is officially taking off in the United States because of the tariffs, as all the economists and experts warned. So, he is in an increasingly difficult spot there. He has the midterms coming up. The more that Canada can stall for time, I think the stronger our position becomes, especially since even with all of these, again, quote unquote deals, Canada's access to the American market is on a relative basis better than it was in January. This is coming from bank economists and their reports recently. The average tariff that Canadian exporters are paying is, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 7%. The EU agreed to a deal for, I believe, 15%, Japan the same. So our terms of trade are actually getting stronger relative to other countries that export to the United States. And again, these tariffs, they might get thrown out by a court. There's a case winding its way through the American system. Trump is very nervous about that. And the midterms are around the corner. So I understand the concerns that Canadians have about, not seeing a deal materialize. But I think we have to trust that this prime minister knows what he's doing. And the results so far seem to speak to that.
So at the end of the day, I mean, it probably, and you write about this in your piece again, nationalobserver.com, that the renewal, or I guess about a year from now, when people are kind of wondering, maybe hearts in their throats a little bit, depending on what their business is, what their industry is, this CUSMA agreement, the Canada, U.S., Mexico agreement. At the end of the day, if that does not, or if that cannot be spun or sold as favorable to Canada or as a win for Canada, that's got to be the benchmark. That's got to be not the finish line, but at that point, you'd have to suggest, I think anybody would suggest, that there would be no more excuses. Canadians, even supporters of Carney, supporters of this Liberal federal government, will only have patience to a point when it comes to those expected deliverables. Do we see eye to eye on that?
Yeah, 100%. CUSMA and the terms upon which it's renegotiated is the litmus test. And I think it seems clear to me that is what Carney and his team are driving towards. It's why they're ragging the puck right now. It's why they're stalling, basically to wait for that renegotiation to be triggered. And if they come out of that, with 25% tariffs or 10%, 15% tariffs, then yeah, the Canadians are going to be pissed off, and Carney and the Liberals are going to have to wear that. That is the end all be all, and it's why our access to the American market is better now than it was in January compared to Europe, Japan, South Korea, the people who struck deals. It's because of CUSMA. So if we lose that shield, or that shield becomes diminished, then the economy is going to be in trouble and the Liberals are going to be in trouble. But I think that is a lot of what the Carney team is doing right now, is they are laying the groundwork for those negotiations. They're talking to, governors, they're talking to state officials, they're working within the Trump administration to, build the case for a renewal of CUSMA, and are getting ready to sacrifice the things that may need to get sacrificed to keep that in place, whether it's, the digital services tax, whether it's maybe supply management in dairy. I think they're ready to make a deal, but that deal will be the litmus test.
That digital services tax, to indict myself here for a second, I don't think we've spent enough time talking about it. I don't think I've focused enough on it, but it has made some differences. At a very small level, I've even noticed that in sharing Real Talk content on some social media sites like Facebook, as an example, it's now allowing us, the platform is now allowing us to link to our full episodes, which may sound like a small thing to some people. For us, that's a huge deal. We were prohibited. It wouldn't allow it. The platform, like Facebook, Instagram was another, of course, similar ownership, same ownership, would delete those posts. They wouldn't allow them to go through. So for a Canadian entrepreneur like me, that's a big deal. But I don't think that the general public really spent much time talking about it. I felt like the Carney government was actually kind of mocked over the DST. When Donald Trump talked about it after Canada eliminated it, it seemed as though he was confused, talking about how Canada had just implemented it. So it clearly, I don't think, resonated with the White House. Did that change your life at all? Did that change the game for Canada's National Observer? Have you noticed any demonstrable impact from getting rid of what was a pretty significant thing? I mean, the Trudeau Liberals fought big tech on this for a long time.
I can't speak to the Observer their end. That we may have seen changes. I haven't really noticed anything. I think one of the strengths of the Carney government so far is its willingness to break with the Trudeau Liberals on policies it doesn't agree with, or policies that aren't working. So we saw that with the carbon tax. We saw that with the capital gains treatment. I think we saw that with the digital services tax. There was a time when it seemed like there was a global consensus emerging that this was the thing to do. And look, these tech companies have been extracting so much value from content producers like you, like me, regular people, and they do need to compensate us, frankly, in some way. But when Trump got elected, that consensus disappeared, and I think to continue to press ahead on our own would be a mistake. We saw this a little bit with the Digital News Act, or the Online News Act, where we kind of volunteered ourselves up as a guinea pig to Meta and Facebook, and they used it. They used us and said, "Look, we're going to punish Canada. We're going to withdraw news from our services in this country to warn off any other countries that might be considering going down this road." That to me was a strategic mistake we made, and I think we may see Carney and his government undo that one as well. I know they're taking a look at the Online News Act because they're not beholden to the decisions that were made by the previous Liberal regime. They have this freedom, whether it's in the polls and their big lead or the election mandate, they have the freedom to make their own choices, and I think they are going to exercise it.
I know you've seen this tweet from Michelle Rempel Garner, the Calgary member of Parliament, shadow minister, the Conservative shadow minister for immigration, because you wrote about it. You cited it in your op-ed. She says, "Explain to me again about the elbows up." She lays out U.S. tariffs on Canada before Mark Carney and then after 5 months of Carney. Softwood lumber has virtually doubled from 14.5% to more than 27% tariff. Steel and aluminum from 25 to 50%. Copper, I'm assuming from 0 to 50%. Non-CUSMA goods from 25 to 35%. That represents about 5% of Canada's exports, but still not insignificant if those are your exports. But some have stayed the same. Energy, 10% before Carney and during Carney. Critical minerals, 10% before Carney, 10% now. Do you see these as wins for Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, who's been advocating for lower or no tariffs on energy? Do you see it as wins for industry lobbies that have gone directly to American counterparts and tried to kickstart their advocacy on south of the Canada-U.S. border? How do you perceive that? Similar tariffs on energy in particular, huge in our home province of Alberta.
I will start by pointing out that it's pretty rich for someone like Michelle Rempel Garner, who spends a lot of her time in the United States, to be making jokes about, elbows up or which way are our elbows pointed. It just seems incredibly tone deaf and crass and sort of blind to what Canadian businesses are going through right now. But, is the fact that energy and potash, haven't faced these big tariffs, is that a win for Danielle Smith and Scott Moe? I guess I'm sure they're going to claim it as one. I just think it speaks to the fact that Trump and his White House are clearly blind to a lot of, material facts around the tariff issue, but they are not completely blind. They understand that raising the cost of potash for farmers, because of course American farmers depend vitally on potash to grow their crops, would be political suicide. They understand that raising the price of energy in the United States would be political suicide. Trump has made driving down gasoline prices a core part of his identity ever since he got into the White House. He berates and bullies, oil producers in his own country to produce more oil, even though it's not profitable right now. So, that is his lodestar, is keeping those costs down. And so, I think he's less aware of the pass-through of things like steel and aluminum or other goods, but he is keenly aware that he cannot afford to raise energy prices or food prices for Americans. So I don't think that's necessarily a win for Canada, but it is a leverage point. I know we don't want to talk about that, but it is a potential leverage point in any renegotiation of CUSMA, and I suspect that is partly why Mark Carney has kept his powder dry on that front.
We're talking to Max Fawcett in our feature interview of this episode presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Max, the lead columnist at Canada's National Observer. We invite you to subscribe just like we do at nationalobserver.com to support Max's and other fact-checked long-form journalism. This interview is happening with the support of Real Talk Partners. Max, I got to ask you about Pierre Poilievre and natural gas in just a quick second. But first, I want to make sure that I talk about the Ranch Golf and Country Club. I was lucky enough to get out there a few days ago. Absolutely perfect conditions at Alberta's #1 public golf course, and any chance I have to show video of my good friends missing putts, I'm going to take it. So here's Andrew Walker. Johnny and I both celebrating Walker's wedding coming up in just a little bit, leaving that birdie putt shy. But look at the quality of those greens. I mean, look at the state of this course right now. Walk's tapping in for par. Very beautifully done. And then here's our buddy Blair. He's got the long one. Walker gives him the read. Walker gives him the line. Can Blair sink it? Also looking for birdie. That would have been his first of the day on 17. And as you can see, despite that beautifully mowed turf, Blair just couldn't drop it. Another par, a tap-in par at my favorite golf course in the Metro Edmonton region. That is the Ranch Golf and Country Club. You can book your tee time today at theranchgolf.com. You know, we're so proud to be supporting UCAN Youth Services through a capital campaign. They're going to officially kick it off a few months from now. We're going to be telling you all about it. A brand new building that allows them to double what they're doing. They're going to be dealing with twice as many, helping out twice as many young people out of harm's way onto paths of economic independence. They do this in large part due to their corporate partnerships. If you're hiring on behalf of your organization or your industry in a service profession, in hospitality, UCAN Youth Services would love to talk to you. They put their young people through pre-employment courses. They get them work ready, and then they place them in jobs where they're bringing a ton to the table. They're motivated to succeed because people are believing in them and they are believing in themselves. That's why IKEA and Tim Hortons and other employers are working with UCAN Youth Services, not to mention the road builders and the construction trades that partner with them through that incredible Road to Work program. You can learn more about what UCAN is doing. I guarantee you'll be impressed when you visit their website, ucan.ca. If you're sick and tired of laundry piled up everywhere, you can't find your golf socks, where is that favorite belt? Your hat, that beautiful hat, was crushed because you didn't realize you had a bunch of laundry piled on top of it. You feel my pain. I'm speaking from firsthand experience. California Closets can sort this out for you. Whether it's a beautiful Murphy bed that turns a home office into a guest room, whether it's laundry room efficiencies that will absolutely transform that space for you, or maybe it's that dream walk-in closet. California Closets does it all. They can work with any space and any budget. It's all guaranteed for life and manufactured right here in Alberta. That all starts with a free consultation, which you can book today by visiting californiaclosets.ca. And as you get set to launch into this weekend, if you're entertaining guests or maybe even just cooking for you and your family, might I recommend a visit to Freson Brothers. It's Hatch chili season, only for a limited time. These are New Mexican grown Hatch chilies that have a wonderful, mild, smoky, kind of a buttery flavor. They're perfect to integrate into your favorite recipes. They use them in salads. Freson Brothers has for a limited time a Hatch chili Gouda that they've made available. You can check out the tutorial on their website, freson.com, how to use your Hatch chilies. I absolutely love that they've done this. How to cook with Hatch chilies. That's just part of what Freson Brothers offers. Nobody is more proudly Alberta-grown and Alberta-owned than Freson Brothers, celebrating 70 years in 2025. Max Fawcett, our guest this morning, is the lead columnist of Canada's National Observer. Of course, everybody's got eyes on this Monday by-election coming up just a few days from now, August 18th. Pierre Poilievre looking to get back into the House of Commons, where he will be officially again the leader of the official opposition Conservatives. Just the other day, from his Twitter account, he says the EU, European Union, sending the Americans $750 billion over 3 years of natural gas. He says since Mark Carney has taken office as Prime Minister, $0 of Canadian energy going to Europe. The Americans cashing in big time. Says Mr. Poilievre, the missed opportunities are piling up because of Prime Minister Carney's liberal anti-energy laws. Poilievre says we need to get shovels in the ground on big projects, and that's what Carney promised, by the way, big projects to deliver bigger paychecks for our people. Your assessment of his indictment of what Carney's done to this point?
I guess his approach is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, because this is what he tried to do in the last election. It did not work, and he doesn't seem to have changed his approach to the truth, for all the talk of him changing his tone. So, look, in that tweet, first of all, he's taking Trump at his word, which is a tell. That's a choice. Any of the reporting you look at around Europe's deal, or specifically around the energy purchases, shows that there's no universe where they can purchase that much energy over that time frame. Rory Johnston, who is one of the best commodity analysts in Canada, politically neutral, a great guy to follow on Twitter. He's basically pointed out that the whole idea of Europe buying that much energy from the U.S. is ludicrous. And you'll note that Pierre Poilievre doesn't even get the facts right on that front. He says it's 750 billion of natural gas. No, it is 750 billion of energy products, which includes oil, it includes nuclear, whatever it might be. So he gets it wrong on both fronts. And then the thing that he really gets wrong is the idea that it's the Liberal government that is the reason why we're not exporting LNG to Europe or exporting oil to Europe. It is the absence of a business case. I know this is really triggering for some people, but there just is not a business case for shipping Alberta gas through an LNG terminal on the East Coast. We heard that from Repsol in 2021 when they pulled out. The numbers just don't work. And again, people are welcome to come onto one of my threads and try to argue the numbers, but they aren't there. Shipping Alberta gas to the East Coast versus shipping Texas gas to the Texas coast, it is just a fundamentally different ballgame. I'm sorry, folks. West Coast LNG, the numbers work barely, and that's why I've supported it for over a decade now. But East Coast is just a different story. Look, even if we had decided we're going to lose money on this because it's important to help our allies, the moment that Russia invaded Ukraine and all of a sudden Europe just basically decided it can't keep importing Russian gas, it needs new sources. If we had started building an LNG terminal at that moment, it still wouldn't be built because these things take time. It might be done by, towards the end of the decade. And then we're exporting gas into a European market where, gas demand is in terminal decline because Europe is electrifying. Europe has a commitment to reach climate targets. It is, building wind, solar, renewables, you name it. So again, there just is no business case here. I know folks don't want to hear that, but it is the truth. And the fact that Pierre Poilievre keeps trying to bang this drum says to me that he hasn't learned a darn thing from getting his butt handed to him in the last election.
I don't even know if you've seen this yet, but Post Media, Calgary Herald business columnist Chris Varco published a piece yesterday on Thursday, reads the headline in the Herald, from no business case to promoting LNG, gas producers welcome Ottawa's new support for growing sector. This is a quote from Federal Natural Resources Minister Tim Hodgson, who addressed a group of business leaders in Calgary. I believe he was welcomed by the Calgary Chamber. I think that was back in May, a few months ago. But it says the Natural Resources Minister, Carney's Liberal Natural Resource Minister, quote, "It's something that our allies are very interested in getting access to. They would like the diversity of supply, and they really like the fact that we produce the cleanest LNG in the world." It doesn't sound to me like, and whatever, I'm not trying to carry water for the federal government. I think this audience would expect and would look for credible, open-minded, insightful analysis of what's actually true. Like, can Poilievre make an argument that there are liberal anti-energy laws with real-life stuff happening like this from his natural resource minister?
I mean, he clearly is going to try. And I think the striking thing about this new energy minister is the way he talks about LNG exports, the way he talks about Canada's potential here, because let's be clear, the previous Liberal government, for all of Trudeau saying there was no business case for East Coast LNG, it threw almost $1 billion in inducements at LNG Canada. The reason why LNG Canada is exporting cargoes right now is in part because the Trudeau government gave it a waiver on duties for importing steel modules that it needed to build that terminal. So he didn't talk about it in the way that the oil and gas industry wanted, and that has clearly just deeply scarred and triggered them. But in the actual substance of the Liberal government's policies, they have been very supportive of the oil and gas industry, whether it's TMX, whether it's LNG Canada. So, yeah, Poilievre can keep trying to make the case that he couldn't successfully prosecute in the last election. But to your point, it will be even harder with an energy minister who is talking a lot like a progressive conservative or like a conservative about these things, and a prime minister who has made it clear that he wants to get these things built. He wants to see Canada move at a speed that it has never moved before, I believe he said, and wants to see major projects built. It just feels like a very weird angle for Poilievre to keep pressing on. Maybe if Trudeau was still here somehow and Guilbeault was still the environment minister, you could try to do this, but these are different guys, and they're playing their hand even more smartly than I think the previous Liberals did.
Yeah, and just a note on that broader U.S.-EU trade framework deal they announced on the 27th of July. The EU pledged to purchase up to $750 billion in U.S. energy products over the next 3 years, comprising of natural gas, oil, and nuclear fuel. Not just natural gas alone, as Pierre Poilievre alluded to. Politico reporting that. MarketWatch.com calling the whole framework of the deal highly aspirational, if not unrealistic, as they cite that in 2024, the EU only imported about $70 billion in energy products from the U.S. as is. So they would have to increase their energy consumption by like 5 or 10x for this whole deal to work.
By the way, for anybody that's just joining us for the first time, you've just discovered Real Talk. That is this show's intrepid technical director, John Hicks, who keeps us on the rails daily from our studio in the historic Mercer warehouse right here in downtown Edmonton.
I'm just Fawcett's wingman is what I am.
You're Fawcett's wingman. You're covering my ass.
And yours, of course.
Doing it all, keeping the good show going. So, I mean, I think, like, generally speaking, listen, nobody wants to, like, cheer against the country. And so, like, I think that when you look at opposition politicians that are there to oppose and sort of, present their alternative vision of how they think it should be done, et cetera, I just think it's safe to say that the average person is hoping for, reasonable, fair analysis. I understand that that's not how politics works. I understand that's kind of like a Pollyanna vision on how we'd love it all, but it's one of the reasons why we appreciate you on the show, Max, to kind of sift through it all and give us the straight goods. Again, Max Fawcett joining us, lead columnist at Canada's National Observer. I don't know if you saw this, but yesterday, well, let me not date this, but basically, as negotiations have continued, and we'll give credit to the Globe and Mail here. This is Dane Patterson reporting flight attendants interrupting an Air Canada news conference as contract talks stall. I've noted this in shows coming up. Check this out. I'll zoom in on this photo. This is from Nathan Dennett with the Canadian Press. Always want to recognize good photojournalism as well. You can see these flight attendants in uniform, by the way. Their QP signs reading, instead of Air Canada, Unfair Canada. I like what they've done there. They say poverty wages are un-Canadian. Of course, this is looking like a disaster waiting to happen, Max, for the hundreds of thousands of people that would plan to be on these Air Canada flights over the next while. We debated on a recent episode, Johnny and I did, members of our Real Talk live chat powered by Park Power, on kind of the sensitive nature of strike action. Oftentimes you got to do it, or at least you feel convinced that you've got to do it to get a good deal. And at the same time, you probably have to consider the potential cons on that list, which could involve losing the public trust, losing public favor, and the like. It's obviously a big deal when you start screwing with people's travel plans. That's not to say that the flight attendants don't have a case. I'm just curious. I'm framing the question to you. Where's your head at on this looming strike that's going to impact people all across the country and beyond?
Yeah, I had a little flutter of terror because my family and I are flying out to BC next week, and
yeah.
We're booked with WestJet, thank goodness. But for a heartbeat, I was like, like, who did we book with? So yeah, there's going to be a lot of people who are very directly impacted by this, and possibly in a very negative way. I think that the Air Canada employees, though, are on the right side and have the high hand here. I was doing some reading into this, and apparently they don't get paid for work they do, like during medical emergencies or when they're on the ground. They only get paid for as long as the airplane is in the air.
This is what someone told us in the live chat the other day.
And I'm sorry, can I do a swear?
Yeah, you can say whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah, that's fucking crazy. Like, these people are at work when they're on the, when the plane has a medical emergency or it's unloading luggage. They're in their uniforms. They're at work. They should get paid. And I think most people already have a pretty dim view of Air Canada as an organization. I don't think there's a lot of pro Air Canada people out there. So I don't think it'll take much to win over the public on this. And I think the government may have to sort of intervene in a way that forces Air Canada to, number one, bargain with these people, and maybe bargain with them in a way where they get paid for all the work they do. It's not reasonable to expect people to do volunteer work for a publicly traded corporation.
Do you do you have, when you say that most people have a dim view of Air Canada? What do you? I mean, that seems, that's kind of a subjective opinion. Obviously, I'm sure that there are some people that are very loyal to Air Canada. Quite frankly, when I fly with the airline. I mean, minus the real, and no offense to anybody that chooses to fly this way, that's your choice. But there are some airlines I've heard again and again and again of the flights being canceled, people being screwed, bags not arriving. There's some airlines I'm not going to name them, but I just won't fly on those airlines. But other than that, I'll fly Air Canada, I'll fly WestJet, I'll fly the American carriers. Like, it doesn't really matter to me. I'm going to fly where I get the best deal, or I can get a direct flight. What do you base your I'm just curious to pick your brain when you say that, like, a lot of people, or even said, I think you said most people have a dim view of Air Canada. Based on what?
I just think that there is, and maybe this is just my experience, but my sense is there is a widespread view that customer service on Air Canada is not as good as it could be, or as good as it used to be. And I think that's true of all airlines. It's true of WestJet. I remember when I flew at WestJet back in the day, there was a meaningful difference in the style of service and the approach that they took. And now it's just like any other airline. It's not great either. So I'm like you. I fly whatever's cheapest. That is not one of the airlines where you could get your flight canceled, or you have to fly into Abbotsford or something. I fly as long as it meets a minimum standard, whatever's cheaper. And maybe that's the service you get as a result. But it doesn't feel like any of these airlines are really trying to distinguish themselves in terms of the customer service experience that they deliver. And certainly my brain tells me that, that there are these like anecdotal stories of where Air Canada just treats its customers almost comically poorly. I'm searching for an anecdote.
Oh, I heard it. I heard this the other day from somebody that was lamenting the change of culture. And again, subjective, right? But someone was talking about how, like, WestJet isn't what WestJet used to be. People loved that WestJet was kind of folky. People loved that WestJet was like based out of Calgary, and they could count on a few hands like how many planes they owned. And people loved that the captains, the pilots, when they'd come on, they'd use their first name, like it's Captain Jack, or it's like, Captain Janelle. And then they would like tell jokes, and they'd be silly, and the flight attendants were somewhat silly. And then WestJet, as Vince Vaughn says in Swingers, it's all grows up. It's kind of changed. It's kind of evolved. But yeah, maybe I kind of get that sense. I don't know about you, Johnny. Like, I sort of gone are the days even where I would wonder, and again, this is probably 20 years ago, but if you were flying, let's say hypothetically, Vancouver to Toronto, or you travel a lot to Ontario, you've got family there, I'd be going, I'd be thinking, I wonder what the in-flight meal is. And now it's like, you just laughed. Like, there's no such thing. Are you tired? You're going to get like a shitty bag of pretzels, and that's it, no matter how long the flight is.
And I agree. When I go to fly, I always go to WestJet first, try and pick them.
You do?
But the one thing about Air Canada is they do have bigger planes more often, especially for flights from, say, Edmonton to Toronto. Okay. I'm probably going to go Air Canada. Bigger plane, less turbulence, probably going to get a screen, a movie, stuff like that. But if I'm just going to Vancouver, Saskatchewan, wherever, it's always WestJet, right? Because it just, you get I don't know, maybe it is a folkier, like a warmer feeling from it.
Well,
right?
I think as a branding exercise, it was brilliant to call it WestJet. If you want to obviously kind of like secure that customer loyalty, and I think that they did, and like Johnny's just saying, that loyalty remains on your part to a certain degree, or with caveats. But WestJet has grown, good for WestJet, like offering, I don't know how many, this isn't a commercial for them, but like dozens of like international destinations. It's not really like the little carrier that could anymore. It's far from it. And then I guess it's, as you expand, you're looking at the same business realities that other airlines are. And this all comes down to the bottom line. Air Canada driving a hard bargain with CUPE, with its flight attendants. Obviously, it's going to cost them. Obviously, an airline's reputation is in the short term anyway, demolished. When something like this happens, people are going to miss funerals, people are going to miss weddings, or at least have to scramble. They're going to pay more for last-minute flights. Like, people are going to be pissed when this goes down, to state the obvious.
Yeah, I think we have to level set our expectations. Air travel remains an amazing miracle. It is not as expensive as it used to be, and so I don't get too bent out of shape over the deterioration in the experience. I remember flying Canadian back in the day before it got folded into one of the other airlines, and that was so much better than what we do now. But we also have in-flight entertainment. We have internet up there. Like, it's fine. And and the fact that that WestJet isn't as folksy as it used to be. I mean, it's owned by a hedge fund out of Toronto now, so it's basically just another Eastern Canadian airline for all intents and purposes. And in fairness to the airlines, which is a phrase I never thought I'd say, it's a brutal business. It is such a hard business to make money in air travel. This is why you have airlines constantly going out of business. It's just the margins are razor thin. It's just really tricky. In all of this, if they go on strike and if there's people who miss important moments, they are going to be pissed. They're going to remember it forever. Unfortunately, they're not going to have a lot of options in terms of where else they might take their business. And so maybe at the end of the day, that strengthens Air Canada's hand. They know that people kind of don't really have a lot of options. I usually have strong takes about things. I don't really have a strong take here other than they should pay their fucking employees.
Yeah, and I mean, like, everybody deserves, I think, to make what they're worth. And there's also different realities, too. Like, I want to ask you about the other high-profile labor dispute in Canada right now, and that's with Canada Post, right? Like, it depends. It's all leverage, right? Like, what do you bring to the table? How replaceable are you? How replaceable are flight attendants? No offense to flight attendants, but probably more replaceable than pilots, right? How replaceable are like EA, like educational assistants in schools? They're integral. They're so important. They make shit money, but they're probably like more replaceable than like principals, or like, you get the idea what I'm saying here. And so like some groups have more leverage than others. And quite frankly, respectfully, my wife's father was a proud letter carrier. We've had letter carriers here in studio. People like, I'm not meaning this as an insult to letter carriers who like served their communities, but like, the business is changing. And Max, we see it with our colleagues in broadcasting and print journalism all the time. So like, I'm speaking from lived and firsthand experience. When your industry dramatically changes and your skill set, or at least your job description, is limited to the previous understanding of your industry or the way that things have been done, not the way that things are moving toward, you lose leverage in negotiations. And sometimes those are big union negotiations, and sometimes that's one-on-one during a performance review when you're trying to convince your boss to give you a cost of living increase. I'm not sure if you saw Les Viner's op-ed in the Globe and Mail. This was a while ago. This was on the 2nd of August, where Les, a savvy, business commentator, an economist, writes that Canada Post is a case study in Canadian dysfunctionality. He was managing partner at Torrey's LLP for like 20 years, and he was interim general counsel for Canada Post for a couple of years ago, a senior fellow with the C.D. Howe Institute. He writes, Canada Post, which predates Confederation, is a vital national institution, playing a particularly important role in serving rural, northern, and Indigenous communities across our vast country. But today, writes Viner, Canada Post is effectively insolvent. He says, indeed, it would have run out of cash had the government not recently extended $1 billion lifeline. He says the situation, no surprise, it's been developing for a long time. Canada Post has been impeded from adapting to modern business realities because of long-standing, here it is, labor inflexibility, as well as oscillation by prior governments between political indifference and political interference. We've got a ton of opinions from Real Talkers in our live chat, powered by Park Power, on this through the number of episodes we've discussed it. What do you expect to see, or what's the formula for the future of Canada Post?
Yeah, I don't have a good feeling about this one. It reminds me a lot of what we went through in journalism with technology, and like you, I have a deep affection for letter carriers. I always say hello to mine when I see her. Like these are good, hardworking people, and they are going to get squeezed between the sides here. There was an opportunity, I think, a while back, and in fairness, the Harper government tried to get ahead of this with Canada Post. They brought in the community mailboxes, they proposed reducing the number of days of delivery, and the Trudeau government unwound all those things because I guess it was popular, but that was the right decision to go to community mailboxes, to end sort of door-to-door delivery, because it just wasn't viable anymore. And it wasn't viable in 2014, 2015. It's really not viable now. Like that piece that you cited there says, like, most of the business now is in packages because almost nobody sends letters anymore. We don't get statements in paper anymore, most of us. And so it's the package business is everything. And that is where Amazon is competing. That is where Uber is competing. You're competing with some of the most aggressive and fine-tuned corporations in the world. You're not going to win if you're not lean. And to stack on top of that technology where, you're going to have driverless cars soon. They're going to do a lot of the deliveries for Amazon, which means drones, which means their costs are going to go down even further. If you're still delivering packages with people, and I don't mean to say that in a way that sounds mean, but you're going to get killed. And so we have to decide, do we want to subsidize this? And to what extent? To what extent are we willing to subsidize this inefficient way of delivering packages when there are more efficient ways out there? And are there better ways of using that money to help these people who have these jobs? Because at some point, the government is going to decide that it can't keep shoveling money into this bigger and bigger hole.
And then there's also the point, I remember her name, it stuck with me a couple episodes ago. Marie lives in rural Alberta. I'm not sure exactly where, but in our live chat, she says she's like, Canada Post is like integral to rural communities. I mean, Les Viner writes about that in his piece, Indigenous communities across the country, et cetera. Like you kind of have to, much like I keep going back to this example because I think it's like apples and apples in a lot of ways. It's like the defund the CBC argument. And like, then you have to say, well, which part of it? And like, what should the CBC's mandate be? And what should it do really well? And what can it do better than anybody else? What can it do where there is no business case for a for-profit entity to do it? Like telling the stories in northern communities, like ensuring that there's access to information and fact-check journalism in communities where like that doesn't exist anymore because all the community papers have evaporated, the radio stations are closing. I'm not Chicken Little. It's happening all the time. It's happening everywhere. So I guess like what's the application? I don't know if you have the answer or not. I don't know if anybody right now has the answer, quite frankly. What's the application along those lines with Canada Post? Like how do you ensure sure, somebody like, us, we're living in a city of 1 million people, or somebody in downtown Toronto has 6 different options if I need to get you a book or if I need to send something to Frankfurt. But somebody that's living like in the sticks, which is not a pejorative, somebody that's living in the middle of nowhere, what are their options other than Canada Post? Not many.
Yeah, that should be the focus. I think the comparison you make is the right one. I've written about the CBC and its future, and I've said many times, like it has to stop trying to be all things to all people. It has to stop sort of constantly expanding into new areas and instead focus, what is it that we do that the private sector can't or won't do? What is the hole that we are uniquely able to fill, and one that serves a social purpose in this country? And, from my perspective, that's like local news, that's news deserts. And I think there's sort of an echo of that in Canada Post. The privates can deliver packages to me in Calgary. Like that is not an issue. They can do it profitably. They can probably do it better. But mail delivery, parcel delivery in small communities, rural communities, they don't want to do that. And they won't do it without charging sort of exorbitant prices. So that is where Canada Post needs to double down, needs to focus its resources on filling the gaps in our system that the private sector won't fill. That is the role of a crown corporation, or at least it should be. And if it is going to survive, I think, as a viable entity, it's not going to be as a commercially profitable one. It is going to be as a socially useful one. And I think that's the sort of mindset shift that has to happen. And that's going to mean fewer employees, especially in urban areas. That sucks for letter carriers. I'm sorry. But sort of continuing down this path because it keeps people employed is not a good enough reason.
Yeah. I feel for people, like I honestly, and I'm speaking from my heart here for real, like there's people, that they've picked a career, for some people it might be education, but like public service, right? Like somebody's chosen to be a firefighter or somebody's chosen to be a letter carrier, and they're going to do that job and they're going to do it proudly for the 30 years or the 35, whatever they need to do to qualify for their full pension. And that's their way of serving their community. That's their way of serving their country. They've done it. They've agreed upon the terms of their employment. They've had that plan kind of, they've been counting down the years till they can collect on that pension. And then like the rug is pulled out from under them, or the landscape changes, or industry evolves, or technology presents new challenges and also new opportunities and new efficiencies. And, it feels like, so I understand like when you're in that position, I'm not a letter carrier, but I can try to walk a mile in their shoes. Remember the letter carrier came on, Johnny told us, what was it, the shoes he recommended? Did he say New Balance?
New Balance.
Yeah, we asked him, Max, what are the best shoes if you're a letter carrier? But to try to walk a mile in those shoes, like, I get where they're coming from. It feels like, the stakes have changed, the landscape's changed, because that is the truth. But the problem here also is that this has to go in front of the Canadian public, and this budget has to be justified. And, you have a government that's trying to find a way to come up with $50 billion more annually for its commitment to NATO and everything else. People are paying higher taxes than they'd like. I mean, the age-old story. And it's just like, it's a tough situation. I can feel for the letter carriers 100%. I can relate to where they're at. And also I think, sometimes, that's the way the cookie crumbles. You just get the shitty end of the deal, Well,
and governments need to get, I think, way more ahead of this issue, because this is going to happen in a lot of sectors. It's not just letter carriers. It's not just journalists. We have AI, AGI coming, general intelligence, where it is going to replace so many jobs, whether it's you're a legal assistant, whether you're, you work in a medical clinic. Like, there's so many white collar jobs that we think ought to be safe, right? This is part of our society. This is, that the businesses that they are attached to are doing fine. Those jobs are all going to disappear in probably 10 or 15 years, maybe faster. And if governments do not have an answer for those people, whether they're letter carriers or, legal assistants or what have you, people are going to turn to other places. They're going to turn to, and we could do a whole other podcast about this, but they're going to turn to populism. They're going to turn to authoritarianism. They're going to turn to answers that they need, because if they're not getting them from the government, they got to get them from somewhere. There is a lot of economic dislocation headed our way, and governments really need to start focusing on what they're going to do to get ahead of it and help people understand it and survive it.
We're talking to Max Fawcett, lead columnist, Canada's National Observer. You can actually read his piece, Saving the CBC, really about saving Canada. Max, you wrote this number of months ago. It was the 19th of November of 2024. But I mean, you make a great argument there. I think people would benefit from it as well. They can check it out at nationalobserver.com. I didn't know that snow clearing policy, snow plowing could be woke or not, but I want to ask you about a new column from a well-known Edmonton commentator. It's just out. I think it was out yesterday. I want to ask you about what Lorne Gunter has to say, and then I want to kind of like mold that or turn that into picking your brain on what you're making of council races, mayoral races in Alberta's two biggest cities. That coming up in just a quick second. Before we get there with Max, I want to let you know that Athabasca University right now is accepting applications, not just for programs and courses, hundreds of them there at Canada's Open University, but also for financial aid and assistance. Athabasca University is all about accessibility. The best part about this is whether or not you're looking at maybe getting back into school, maybe pursuing your post-secondary dream this fall, or maybe through the winter, or maybe next spring, or maybe whenever. AU's world-class accredited online degrees and courses are designed so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you. That is just part of the AU advantage. You can open your options with the online offerings at Athabasca University, where your only commute is to your device. You can learn more about how AU works, or just go ahead and apply today at athabascau.ca. Kubi customers pretty happy this time of year, as they are seeing, in many cases, their energy bills down to zero. I mean, imagine opening your power bill and not flinching. How great would that be? That's what solar can do. By producing your own power, you can save between 20 to 100% of your electricity costs. A lot of systems now paying for themselves in 5 to 10 years. And it's never been more doable. Between that Canada Greener Homes Loan and programs like the Clean Energy Improvement Program, you don't even have to shell out the full cost up front to get started. Plus, with net metering, you can earn credits for the extra power you produce in the summer. Use that to cut your winter bills. You can check out kubi.ca/solar. That's kuby.ca/solar for a free quote and more information. Kubi is solar simplified and people powered. If you're using this summer to evaluate not just your career to this point, but also maybe take a look at what a successful retirement would look like, the team at North Road Investment Council would love to talk to you. They work with Canadians who have built successful careers but now want to ensure that their wealth is being organized to deliver a successful retirement. Their typical client has about $2 million in investable assets, oftentimes coming from detail-driven analytical professions, engineers, architects, dentists. If that sounds like you're looking for a steady hand, you're looking for a studied voice, the team at North Road Investment Council is interested and open to a conversation. You can check out their website under the sponsors tab on ours, RyanJesperson.com, or visit northroadic.com and start a conversation built on clarity, discipline, and true alignment. And this is a special message for those of you that have a big date coming up. Maybe it's a patio party with your friends. Maybe it's one of those summer anniversary parties, a big one like a 30th or a 40th or a 50th. Could be a graduation party, a wedding, whatever it is. May I recommend The Helm. Founded in Edmonton, The Helm is a contemporary 3-story retail experience. I use those words on purpose. This is a retail experience right in Edmonton's downtown core. It's a stunning location. I walk over there from our studio in Mercer Warehouse. They're focused on custom suits and luxury casual wear. So whether you're headed abroad, maybe a beautiful summer vacation with your family, or maybe you're staying right here at home, if you're into, Ralph Lauren, Zegna, Brunello Cucinelli, there's a whole lot more. I'm just naming some of my favorites. You'll find them at The Helm, and the customer service is second to none. Again, this is a 3-story retail experience right here in Edmonton's downtown. Or, of course, you can visit them online as well at thehelmclothing.com. I feel like you and I need to go hit the Helm before our next big relay party, Johnny.
Yeah.
Maybe we could get matching outfits. What do you think about that? I like the idea. Hey, Max, I don't know if you saw Lorne Gunter's piece in the Edmonton Journal. He has progressive in quotes. He says, progressive Edmonton Council, and by the way, I personally think that's a fair assessment of this council. But he says, progressive Edmonton Council too obsessed with woke projects to take care of the basics. Kudos to whoever wrote the headline because it worked. I clicked on it right away. I'm starting to think I should use the word woke in much more of what we do here. But he goes on to talk about the city's official snow clearing plan, talks about how it's been in existence for like 70 years. He says you would think by now there wouldn't be much to rethink every winter, writes Lorne. Sure, a tweak here, an adjustment there. For example, which major roads and new subdivisions should get the same priority treatment as major roads in established neighborhoods. But then he reports on a council committee meeting that was held here in Edmonton a number of days ago with some reports or some suggestions from administration on options on how to improve snow clearing. And one of the new aspects is that administration now believes there should be a socioeconomic component to deciding which neighborhoods get plowed the fastest and most often. In several places of the report, Edmonton City Admin recommends giving priority to so-called socially vulnerable areas of town. Gunter says they need to stop overthinking this each and every year. He goes on to talk about the budget implications and ultimately says, things like what a city can do well, police, fire, snow removal, sewers, garbage collection, public parks, transit buses aren't sexy enough for an uber progressive council who is, quote, fixated with spending billions on building an underused LRT network, underused is fair, he says, and hundreds of millions constructing an ultra-green development at Blatchford, among other non-essential projects. He says, time for a change at the top. Well, Edmonton's getting a change at the top, whether Gunter wants it or not, so he's not running. This new council could look very different. But what's your take on his argument there?
We should check if there's a full moon because I actually agree with Lorne Gunter here.
Whoa!
Yeah, which almost never happens. I'm not sure if it has ever happened. So maybe not a full moon, maybe an eclipse. Look, I refer to this I think of this as the Rob Ford theory of municipal government. I remember when I lived in Toronto back in the day and, Rob Ford got elected mayor, repeatedly, and progressives could not understand how it was happening. He's a slob. He's a doofus. He doesn't think the way most Torontonians think. How did he get elected and how does he keep getting reelected? And the answer was he understands what the job description is of a mayor, which is you pick up the garbage, you plow the snow, and you keep things clean, right? You take care of the basics. And I think the kryptonite of progressive municipal politicians is they hate the basics. They're not interested in the basics. The basics, to Lorne Gunter's point, it's not sexy enough, right? And so they do things like declare climate emergencies or have socially informed strategies for snow plowing. And I don't question their heart. I don't question that they want to do good for the world, but that is not the job of a municipal politician. The job of a municipal politician is to ensure that basic services are done properly. And then if there's anything left over, if there's any time, money, what have you left over, then you maybe move up the hierarchy of needs and start focusing on climate emergencies or things like that. It is just not good politics, right? If you care about these issues, if you care about climate change, if you care about marginalized communities, you should want your progressive politicians to pick up the garbage and plow the snow properly, because that's what keeps them in office. And you're going to see it in Edmonton, I suspect, in the municipal election. You're going to see it, I suspect, in Calgary, where progressive politicians get swept off the map because they have not been focusing on the things that actually matter to voters in those elections.
Yeah,
If they want to do climate policy, if they want to do social policy, run provincially, run federally. But if you want to run municipally, do your job.
Are you expecting, you and I haven't spent a ton of time talking about these municipal elections, and as a note for our audience, we'll hammer down on this more significantly this fall, the election coming up October 20th. It'll be a larger part of our content in September and October. A tale of two cities, interesting to watch, and that's not ignoring the other communities across the province. Obviously, we could see big changes in a lot of centers, urban and rural. But particularly in Calgary and Edmonton, it'll be interesting to see the incumbent in Calgary being challenged by some significant contenders, I think. And in Edmonton, it is an absolutely wide open race right now with, I think, 3 front runners. And depending on whose polling you're looking at, this is anybody's race to win. What are you paying attention to?
Yeah, it is remarkably wide open in both races. Here in Calgary, we have Mayor Jyoti Gondek, who is running again. She may split the vote. She may benefit from a split of the vote and come up the middle. You never know. You have Jeremy Farkas 2.0, who I find, I have to confess, I find him very charming in this new version of himself.
Me too.
He's honest. He's transparent. And he seems to care about the right things now. He seems to have learned his lessons. And for me, he got the 2 big things over the last little while. He got those right in ways that other people didn't, which was the arena deal, which I think stinks. And he said that it stunk from day one. All the progressive councillors voted for it. Don't ask me why. And he got the LRT and basically the Green Line and the provinces meddling on it. He was right about that from the start. So he's sort of the candidate who interests me the most. But I think we are going to see councils, regardless of what happens at the mayoral level, councils that go very far away from the progressive side. Most of the progressive councillors here in Calgary aren't even running again because I think they know they wouldn't have a hope in hell of winning. And so I think we are going to see a shift. Now, part of that is because of the introduction of political parties, because the province clearly wants to have its thumb on the scale at the municipal level. Part of it is because it's a really tough job right now. You have a province that is constantly interfering in your business, and can basically interject itself in your big decisions. Why is that a job that you would want? And there's, I think, like I said, there's a building frustration with the fact that progressively governed cities have not paid enough attention to the basics, and there's a price to pay for that. And I think it's coming this fall.
Yeah, agreed. Max is the author of Canada Isn't Losing the Trade War Yet. You can find it. You can read it at nationalobserver.com. We encourage you to subscribe and support Max's journalism. Buddy, it's always so great having you on the show. We really enjoy it. Have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, you as well. Love doing these.
Yeah. Hey, that's assuming, by the way, that nobody deploys nukes if everything goes sideways in Anchorage. I'll offer that caveat as well. If so, goodbye. It's been wonderful knowing you.
Exactly. It's been a slice.
Okay. Thanks, Max. That's Max Fawcett from Canada's National Observer. I had somebody kind of pin me down the other day and say, okay, you've talked to all three of them. I appreciated them recognizing this. They said all three of them announced their campaigns on Real Talk. They said, so what do you think is going to happen with Tim Cartmel, Andrew Knack, and Michael Walters? And I took the opportunity to say, okay, let's not rule out the others. I mean, they're not, just being honest, Real Talk, like they're not going to win. But like Raheem Jaffer's polling higher than I think people thought he would. I think Dr. Omar Mohammed, he's a candidate here in Edmonton running for mayor, is like running the most entertaining campaign. He's putting so much work into it. He's doing like a really great job, but he's like fighting on the name recognition battle. And I think he's just kind of like there's a bit of a barrier there, which is tough because I think he's the exact type of person you want in politics. There's Tony Katarina, the former Edmonton councillor that's running, and others. But this guy says to me, so who do you think? Who do you think of those three? Walters, Cartmel, Knack. I was like, honestly, man, I have no idea. And I'm not even trying to be coy, and I'm not trying to be cool.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I could, and someone would say, well, you shouldn't be picking favorites before the election, this, that, and the other. But I honestly feel like, typically in these cities, in Calgary and Edmonton, it takes not every time, but between like 90 and 130,000 votes to be mayor. And oftentimes the second place, like Mike Nickel in Edmonton a while ago, like Jeremy Farkas in Calgary a while ago, they can come in running formidable campaigns with 60, 70,000 votes. And then you get a few people at 20 to 30,000. And then you get a bunch at like 3,000. But I honestly don't know. I feel like right now it is absolutely wide open in Edmonton. I don't know if you have a sense otherwise.
Same thing.
Yeah, I gauge that based on who has lawn signs out and who the buzz is around. And then anecdotally, which is, I'll acknowledge a limited sample size, but I always pay attention. Maybe it's the talk show host in me, but you've seen me do it a million times. I'll answer questions with questions, right? Jespo, who do you think's going to win it? Well, who do you think's going to win this? I want to know what I'm dealing with before I talk to this person. And honestly, I can't think of a time when Edmonton's mayoral race, we're talking about our home city here, obviously. A lot of you don't live here, maybe don't even care about this. But I can't think of a time where it was this wide open, where there wasn't one favorite.
Yeah, I think, and I don't want to say it's a boring race. It's definitely not. All three shows we had all three candidates on were great. The chat was fired up. But it just feels like I said before, they're all discussing the same, no one's standing out. Even today, we're talking about infills, which is gets people fired up.
Oh, yeah.
And we're talking about recycling. We're talking about parking. And there's also not a lot of money to spend right now. I just feel like everyone's got kind of the same platform going, housing and all that stuff, which is important. But I just feel like there's no drama here yet, right? Which isn't. I wouldn't be surprised to see a lower voter turnout than usual, just because things aren't spicy enough. I just feel that, right?
Oh, that's an interesting angle. Yeah. What will
Whereas
a candidate do to spice it up?
If Sohi was running again, you'd have an attack campaign from all the other candidates, right?
Yes.
Whereas you've got like you said the other day, Andrew Knack, super nice. Walters is in here, super nice.
Yeah,
Tim Cartmel is in here, calm.
Yeah.
Thinks before he speaks.
Well, calm in front of the camera.
Other than Jaffer, like you said.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no one in there really stirring things up. You know what I mean? And even we shared a short of the infill situation going on, and a friend of yours who, friend of the show.
Travis Watt,
who was involved directly in infills next to his home, multi-level, multi-residential building built next to his dream home, a few years after he moved in. And we put this short up. And in the short, he mentions Andrew Knack and mentions walking around with Andrew Knack. And then we showed Andrew Knack in the video. And Tim Cartmel shared it. And I was like, what is happening here? These guys are too nice. In general, they're too nice to each other. It's wild.
You want this to get a little nastier?
No, I don't want it to get nasty, but it seems like everyone has the same platform. They're all talking about the same things, and they're all being courteous to each other. So I just don't see. I'm like you. I have no idea who's going to win. I think it's going to be close, and I think the turnout is just going to be less because
we'll see.
People are like, there's no spice.
That's the challenge of the campaigns, right? That's their challenge, is they got to get out the vote. That, by the way, was June 25th when we spoke with Travis Watt. I really appreciated his He's like a citizen, right? He's not like a spokesperson for some big thing, but he came on to tell his story, and it was fascinating in this our Real Talk live chat powered by Park Power. We love you guys. Great to see you all in here today as well. But some people were like kind of with Waddy, they were like, oh, I can feel his pain. They're doing the same. Someone's, some assholes building like an 8-unit superplex right in the middle of our block, knocked down a wartime bungalow, hurting the character of the street. And then other people just piled on him and ate him alive as like a NIMBY elitist kind of a thing. It's not the only issue where this happens, but like you see, people's personal perspectives on like how a city should run, what defines community, what defines character of a neighborhood, what's the top priority when it comes to like density, affordable housing, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot of layers to it, right?
But does an infill situation affect enough people to get you elected as mayor? No. So I think
if anything, sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
But like Tim Cartmel's infill position totally fucked him, actually.
A little,
if you look at it, he had the and again, like there's still time before the election, and they can like pull this campaign out of the rocky waters that it's in right now. But Cartmel was cruising along just fine and was like, raising hundreds and hundreds of thousands and had the early lead. You had Alberta's best event host hosting his fundraiser at the convention center here in Edmonton and the like. And then he identified, or his team identified, infills as something they wanted to sink their teeth into, and then totally blew it, missed the vote, and has been pummeled for that ever since. Like, as a matter of fact, if he would have left infill, now it's easy for me to say. It's easy to be a talk show host, guys, because you look back and you call me out for something I said a year ago, and I get to just say like, well, yeah, I was wrong, or we have a difference of opinion. Like, these are people we're trusting to like invoke bylaws and like change policies, and there are millions and millions and millions of dollars at play, and like it's high profile stuff. At the end of the day, we did yesterday's show on, if you missed it, by the way, wine, spirits, and ready to drink cocktails. It was like a super fun show, but we can do that. We can kind of take days away from the political cycle, and we can explore things we've wanted to explore, and that's fine, because what we do is arguably not as important as what policymakers are doing, right? So it's easy for me to sit here and chirp a campaign's decision to do a certain thing.
Sure.
But at the same time, Cartmel and any other candidate does not have the luxury of simply saying, oh, I'm just not going to take a position on infill. Well, you have to.
Yeah, and when it seems like, this is what I'm saying, it seems like it's the only issue. I mean, there's other issues going on, but like, the things we cared about maybe 5 years ago are all kind of not taken care of, but like the LRT thing, Millwoods is up, Chappelle is up, the bridge projects are already under construction, those 5 bridges or whatever, 3 or 4 bridges they're repairing. The bike lanes are already built. I just feel like there's not like, is this going to come down to a vote on woke snow removal? Like, you know what I mean? like they're talking about all the same issues, and they're like, we need to address houselessness but that's more like, that involves the provincial government, our premier, I think, a little more than just, our mayor. That's like, that's a provincial thing. But like in general, I'm like, what is the main issue here that's going to get someone elected? And I don't know what it is. I think it's a mixture of everything. And I think the bad thing about all the candidates is they're all nice guys. They're all calm. They're all well thought out. And so they're very similar. I mean, not similar in personality, but there's nothing that sticks out to me from one or the other.
Yeah.
It's just,
there's no,
and that's just me, the everyday guy, saying, I don't see a big flag that I can, plant with one guy or the other.
Johnny Infamous wants a prick as mayor.
I don't want this woke snow removal. All right? I want conservative. I want less snow removal, but I want it done faster.
You want your snow removal done with the heat from fossil fuels.
I want AI doing it so it knows exactly when.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea. Hey, listen, we welcome your feedback, not just to this, but on everything we talk about. You can send us an email anytime to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Leave a comment on our YouTube episodes. Leave a comment on Spotify, or pile on us on social media. You'll find Real Talk RJ virtually on every platform. Once a week, we take some of the best, some of the fieriest, some of the hottest takes that we've seen that have been submitted. These are all real messages from real talkers just like you. It's the Flamethrower, presented by our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. That's right. You have Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, Baseline Road. By the way, the other day had one of those Superman blizzards. Our Wyatt Rudy, our son, he was like, can you please take me to DQ first? He knows how to get me.
Yeah.
He knows I'm never going to say no to DQ because of how much we love them and how much we appreciate them. That Superman Blizzard,
It's
like
a crazy
blue
mix, eh?
Dude, it has sorry, I flamethrower in just a second, but cookie dough in it and sprinkles
Birthday
and like
cake,
unbelievable,
I don't know. It's wild.
unbelievable.
It's wild.
I had to teach Wyatt about taxes, as a matter of fact. The wonderful Dairy Queen employee handed me the Blizzard into my driver's window, and I had to teach Wyatt, you are now being taxed. 5% of your Blizzard right off the top. All right, here we go. This is from Jake. Jake caught our interview with Dr. Mark Tyndall on the 12th of August. That was Puff or Pass, the truth about vaping. I'm showing it to you on my screen right now. Jake says, Jespo, Johnny, I'm listening to that Dr. Tyndall episode about vaping, and I am worked up. Is this guy for fucking real? Says Jake. How does this guy sleep at night, and how much money is he getting from Big Tobacco for promoting this shit? For real, though, how much? He says, okay, so I get his point that a cigarette smoker's better off vaping. I agree. However, says Jake, anybody with even a modicum of intelligence can see that the vast majority of users of vapes and Xonics, those dingers, those lip pillows, are not smokers. I can't believe you can say with a straight face that this shit is not marketed to kids. I've seen firsthand how addictive those little vapes you can buy at 7-Eleven are. First of all, the level of nicotine is insane. One pod has like the same amount of nicotine as a pack of cigarettes, and that cute little stick that tastes like candy, damn, it's kind of a nice buzz, too. He says, give me a break with this nonsense and call this what it is, says Jake. Big Tobacco found a new way to get its money, and it's through vapes and Zins. And I gotta say, though, having given up nicotine entirely, says Jake, by the way, nicotine, the addictive substance in cigarettes, but good to know the doctor says it's like harmless in a pouch or a pillow. Listening to his spiel made me seriously feel like saying, fuck it, and getting back on that nicotine train. I won't, because as a recovering alcoholic, I have no desire to be a slave to another addiction. Attaboy, Jake. He says, anyway, I love you guys. I love the show. Keep it up. He says, I doubt I'm the only one who thinks this doctor has his head in the sand. I'm looking forward to hearing the other hot takes. That from Jake. Well, Jake, the good news is, wait, there's more. This one from Andrew, who says, Jespo, my wife and I were listening to your pod featuring the interview with Dr. Mark Tyndall on August 2nd, who became an accidental advocate for vaping. He sounds like a corporate prostitute advocating for it. We turned off your podcast completely disgusted. We were hoping for some helpful insight. I think there was some helpful insight, but I digress. Back to your email, Andrew.
Don't turn us off.
He said, don't turn us off. Stay on. Get angry. No, he says, here's a picture from a service wall that I recently did from one of our indoor room divider waterfall feature. These are water wall features we design, manufacture, and install right here in Edmonton. He says that snot that's clinging to the intake screen of our submersible pump is vaping vapors. I mean, we'll take your word for it, Andrew, but he says they got in contact with the water in our water feature and got stuck in the system. Imagine what that's doing to the lungs of people who vape. I'm just going to note, to be responsible, this has not been fact-checked. I'll take Andrew at his word. He says the only time I ever see snot like this in our features for annual servicing, he says the color, the consistency is when someone in the household has been vaping. You look very troubled right now.
I need someone else to weigh in.
I'm not saying you're a liar, Andrew. I'm not saying that at all. But I don't know. I don't know. We'll have to check the HVAC in our studio. Uh-oh. And how about this one from Bruce, who says, Jespo, I've got many questions about your interview with Dr. Mark Tyndall on vaping, and you are obviously correct. He says, I absolutely agree that you need to explore every possible angle and voice on stories, but the doctor's obvious apologia and his Lance Armstrong level context misdirection, right? He says, like Lance Armstrong, I never tested positive, or like this, it's a safer alternative, it's harm reduction. He says, remained curiously unchallenged, and so too did the omission to disclose or identify the doctor's participation in VITA. Bruce is right. I mean, Dr. Tyndall has worked as a harm reduction advisor for the Vaping Industry Trade Association. He says, I hope that was an oversight and not a gateway to smoke-free advertising or promotion. He says the Line podcast with Jen Gerson and Matt Gurney certainly went down that road under a libertarian umbrella, but that doesn't make it any less distasteful. Jen, Matt, not trying to pick a fight with you. He says maybe you could have Ronna Ambrose on, former health minister, and ask how she failed as health minister to apply regulations to vapes while acting in that role, and then accepted board position with Jewel. Is that how you pronounce it? Jewel? J-U-U-L?
The singer?
The big, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
What was Jewel's
J-U-L.
song again? What was that song? Didn't she marry a bull rider? Anyway, that's not who Bruce is talking. Sorry, Bruce. It's not that we don't take your email seriously. We do. He says, just as a frequent listener, I needed to offer feedback. It's excellent feedback, Bruce. We appreciate you, and thank you. How about this one from Neil Koratash? Neil says, gentlemen, and Johnny, you're getting looped into this. It's not your fault. You did nothing wrong. This is all on me.
Okay.
Guilt by association. Neil says, gentlemen, I let it slide the first time, but twice merits an email. Catching up on my Real Talk since getting back from holidays. Thank you, Neil. We appreciate you. He says, Jespo, you've now said a couple of times, and he's right. This is shit. He's right. The longtime political organizer and now candidate Troy Wason is running for council in St. Albert. He says that is incorrect. He says Troy's running in Medicine Hat. Says Neil, and it's true. I looked it up. I was like, fuck. That said, says Neil, if you're looking to plug a St. Albert City Council candidate who's actually running, you're always welcome to drop my name. Ladies and gentlemen, I rarely, if ever, do this. Having known him for 15 years, I hereby endorse Neil Koratash as a candidate for council in the city of St. Albert. I hope I've made amends, Neil, and thank you for your email. This from Tara. Tara was watching our Disability Pride Roundtable. This was a really, really good conversation. You can find it. That was our July 25th episode featuring Brad Bartko, Bean Gill, and Carrie Anton. I loved the conversation about inclusion and accessibility. And if you love seeing me get called to the carpet, you'll love this one because Bean lectured me in a fun way and in a loving way to stop opening doors for people with disabilities. It was an amazing conversation, and it prompted Tara to write in. And Tara says, if you ever do another disability talk, which we will, she says it would be wonderful to see something on invisible disabilities and the issues people may face if we don't look disabled, for example, or perhaps if we marry somebody who's not disabled and we get kicked off AISH, or AISH takes dollar for dollar of the Canada disability benefit, which is true. Alberta's the only province clawing that back. It's bullshit. Or maybe ties the partner's income to how much one should receive if they're on AISH. She says, I know all of this all too well, and I would love to talk about it. Tara, we appreciate you putting it on our radar. And finally, how about this one? This was a fiery episode with Sharon Carr. This is on August 5th. We talked to her about what's going on in Gaza. We talked to her about Quebec's Bill 21. We talked to her about the Poilievre by-election and more. Always appreciate Sharon's take on this. But Kinneret, who I've known since high school, by the way, and who watches the show from Israel, she was actually on the show right after the October 7th attacks. I'm not sure if you remember. It was a really powerful interview. She wrote in and she says, Jespo, you have some seriously hateful and fucked up people on your feed. She says, I expect that on any podcast, but have I ever once sent you something that indicates that I want a genocide of Palestinians? Have I ever once acted or given you the feeling that I think I am better because I'm Jewish? And Kinneret, the answer is no. But she says, Ryan, this is my real life, and my real friends are dying. These people do not know what the fuck they're talking about. You bring them on the show. Hamas doesn't care about Gazans. They're using them to create these horrible, horrible scenarios that lead to severe anti-Semitism around the world. And your report with Sharon Carr just contributes to that. And that's why I'm upset. She says the IDF isn't perfect. She says, I know that some soldiers sodomized a terrorist after they learned what he had done to women at the Nova Festival. They should not have done that. Rape by Hamas is celebrated, and I'm sorry to say, but women's rights in Gaza are deplorable. All women suffer there, and all Palestinians suffer under Hamas, yet some of them care more about killing us than having a good life, and I know this, she says in all caps. She says Westerners can't swallow the mentality because it's so far from what they know and put their values in when it comes to the Middle East, where aside from a few places, the value system is very different. She says, I'm not saying there's not hunger in Gaza. And she says, and I am saying, though, that some of the photos you guys used as propaganda is evil. She says you would think things were bad enough that they wouldn't have to be making fake footage. I will say we get our images from Getty Images and we stand by them. She says, but I have seen so much through this war. She says it's the constant lying, not just now, but what's always making some Israelis feel indifferent at times. People don't know what to believe anymore. She says, I implore you to encourage real talkers to read the book Ghosts of a Holy War, the lies that perpetrated the 1929 Hebron massacre. She says it's very well written. That from Kinneret. who watches Real Talk from Israel and whose perspective we certainly appreciate. The Flamethrower is presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, Baseline Road. They are all about real talk, and it shows. The next time you go in there to grab a Flamethrower signature stack burger, you let them know that Real Talk sent you. My friends, have a safe and wonderful weekend. We will be back at it live from the historic Mercer Warehouse a couple of days from now. One love.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lauren Sterlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Kandola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.